Hello everyone, my name is Sean Carlson, and today I'm joined by Evan Shin, Alex Sobey-Strick, and Thinley Wongchuk. And today we are talking about the FAST telescope controversy. So what is the FAST telescope? The FAST telescope stands for the 500-meter aperture spherical telescope. And this is the world's largest radio telescope. As indicated by its name, it is 500 meters long in diameter. It was built by China from 2011 to 2016, and the entire project cost approximately 1.2 billion yuan, which is equal to about 180 million US dollars. The immense size of this project allows for collecting more signal and gives better angular resolution when studying large wavelengths like radio waves. And more specifically, to put things in perspective, this telescope is two-thirds times larger than the Arecibo Observatory in Puerto Rico, and 10 times more sensitive than the steerable radio telescope in Germany, which is about 100 meters.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about why this telescope was built, to understand the controversies behind it. One also has to understand what its purpose was. And so, it is a radio telescope, and so it's mainly used for studying pulsars, which are these rapidly spinning neutron stars. Quasars, where you have a neutron star that is spinning very quickly, that is emitting gamma rays in these bursts, and then just generally the cosmic microwave background radiation. Detecting that. And actually quite a bit of these of the Nobel Prizes in this field have gone to work that has been done with a radio telescope. So these are important telescopes that are vital for science, that are still critical to our advancement. But this work isn't done right away. The first 2 to 3 years of operation are mostly adjustment and early stage research, just getting things calibrated and understanding how this machine works. That information comes from source one, and also from source one, that we learned that the telescope will be open to all scientists and will also be able to be controlled remotely from up to 2,000 kilometers away, which is really important because it's not super feasible for all of these top astronomers to travel to China to do this research. It's pretty common, from what I understand in the field, for remote operation of these radio telescopes. And the landing of the rover on Mars in 2021 in May was a big scientific leap and advancement for China, and since they have also been trying to work even more so towards like space exploration technology and being a forefront of scientific knowledge in the global community. And so where was this telescope built? This is kind of really critical to this controversy. It was built in the Pingtung County in the Chinese province of Guizhou. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but I'm doing my best. It was built in a depression inside of these mountains. So we have like these forested mountains with a big, almost like crater inside, and so that's where this telescope was built. This area was chosen due to the lack of major cities nearby. It's quite a remote area. And so complete radio silence is required to operate this telescope. If we had like a cell phone going or something, that would pretty obviously interfere with the very sensitive information that this telescope is looking to collect. And so, that's part of the reason it was in this remote area. The cities that are nearby are, lower income. All of these factors are important reasons for why it was chosen for this area, but as we'll see, there were some problems with that as well.
Okay, so what has the telescope actually been used for so far? So as we mentioned before, since it's a large radio telescope, one of the main things it's actually been used for is hopes of detecting gravitational waves through looking at these pulsars, changes in the frequency that they rotate at. So the globular cluster pulsar survey using this telescope was launched in 2018. And recently in July 2021, the telescope was used to discover 24 new pulsars in 15 different globular clusters, practically doubling the number of globular cluster pulsars that were previously known. So that's a really big advancement. Also, in this same study, some of the pulsars were black widow or red-black pulsars, which means that they are circling around another lower mass star, and it actually consumes the smaller star. One last thing is it was used recently to detect fast radio bursts, which come from distant galaxies. So that's displaying, how far it can really see out into space. So what is the controversy? What went wrong here? So basically, the main thing is that the construction of the telescope displaced 2,029 families, or a total of 9,110 people, mostly in the surrounding villages within 3 miles of the actual telescope, because of the need for radio silence, and just because the telescope is so large. The government has promised, or did promise and did compensate the villagers with a equivalent of $1,800 per villager. And while that sounds like a decent amount, it's not sufficient in that a lot of these villagers only were knew agriculture and specific ways of making a living, and so if you're bringing them to a totally different setting, just giving them some money isn't gonna solve the problem. You would need a more in-depth kind of program for this relocation, since it's just at such a large scale. One other kind of controversy is that there actually wasn't a lead director in place before making before the construction of the telescope, and in the following years after. One reason for this is the job requires 20 plus years of telescope experience, and you have to have had a leading role in a similar large-scale radio telescope position. So it's just really hard to find a qualified person. So they didn't really think that through.
So I'm going to be talking about what went wrong, and as Alex presented earlier, there's a lot of controversy surrounding the building of the telescope, and first and foremost, a big thing that faced a lot of controversy was the fact that the UN itself had placed rules against China's eviction against communities, not only this community, but communities before too, and China has continued, the Chinese government has continued to do such evictions, including this community. And another reason why the building of this telescope was wrong and controversial was because the other locations were not thoroughly investigated. So as soon as they found something that was that matched the conditions that they required, that Evan presented earlier, they pounced on the opportunity, and they were able to get the village and were able to displace the villagers. And also, as Alex mentioned earlier, there was also not a set director, and a director is one of the leads and one of the main people in terms of the whole structural process and to construct the telescope that is required. And not having that in place itself means that there wasn't much thought and planning that was put into the goals or like what the government wants to achieve with the telescope. And another thing was also that the research goals were not completely communicated to the community itself too. So they weren't made aware of what benefits it would do to not only mankind but also their community in particular. They did sort of specify that the telescope would largely be focused on finding more information on extraterrestrial life, but based on recent news and research, we've come to conclude that the telescope hasn't been doing much of that. And moving on, I'll also be talking about what should be done in the future. So first is, again, as I mentioned with my last point, that the government should communicate the plans and what benefits would come through this project to the community and just in general globally in a more efficient level, so that everyone has a clear idea and concise idea of what the plan is and what they're going to achieve through this telescope. And obviously the people affected by this telescope was one of the main key factors to what contributed to making this controversy so big. So even if they are displaced, the people should have compensation that is sufficient for them to live a normal life later, and for them to be able to achieve what they already have or what they were going to get. And furthermore, even if the government wants to displace them, they should be able to voice their opinion and concerns, because other than the practical facilities that come through money, there's also a lot of different factors that come into play when displacing or evicting people. For example, their culture, their tradition, their heritage that's associated with the area and land surrounding the village, because they've been living there for so many years. And the fact that the government was able to just evict them seems pretty astounding to our group. Furthermore, we also need confirmation that there should be a sufficient amount of employees and that are able to build the telescope, and also a sufficient amount of staff. For example, the lead director. We should confirm the fact that there was no confirmation of a lead director was also a big factor in like how it became a controversial project. And finally, we also need to have realistic goals and benefits for the telescope and project. So again, as I mentioned earlier, alien life is pretty uncertain, and the fact that they were able to evict the whole community just based on the fact that they wanted to find more research is sort of doesn't align with ethics of many people, so that's a big factor too. And that's about it. And these are the image references for all of the images in our slides and in our presentation. Thank you.